So thanks for joining the webinar this afternoon. I mean, introductions to all. It's a Friday afternoon. It's really warm. We're in Zoom. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Up in the top right of the window here, we've got different views. You can choose a speaker view, which highlights whoever's talking, which might be me for a little bit of it, but hopefully not all the time. And there's a gallery view. I actually prefer the gallery view. So if you get to click, that's just in the top right. Lewis has already found the chat window down in the bottom right, which is good. So that's in the kind of participants area of Zoom. So if you'd like to click down there and type something in, that's another way of communicating. There you are, Jay. And what I'd like to do, because in the past we've been stuck for time, and I do like to keep it to half an hour, all I'll leave hanging is a question that if you indeed have a question for me or something you'd like the webinar to cover, if you can just maybe type it in that window, firstly to check it's working, and secondly to actually remind me to come back to it at the end. So if you just leave a question in that chat, maybe something you'd like the webinar to answer. It is about expanding your team and making sure the team are engaged and communicating. So if it's a question around that, that would be good. If it isn't, then that's fine as well. So it could just be a question about big picture or engagement in general, or me, or anything you like. If you just type it in that window as I'm talking, and then we can maybe pick them up at the end. Has everyone got access to that chat window?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. I find the software really quite intuitive to use, so hopefully you do too, and that's why we've chosen it for the big picture webinars. The prop that I sent out that I've been sharing with you, has everybody had a chance to print that out and use it? Have they got that in front of them? Full marks to Jay. Joanne's got it as well.
The colour and everything.
You managed to get it?
I've got it on screen, but I can't print it.
That's fine. Okay, well, if you've got some paper in front of you, if you just kind of follow along, but you'll get the general idea as like an intermediate kind of stage, but without actually writing on. And that's one of the key things about the webinar today. It's actually about doing things. I go on quite a few webinars and they become like broadcast mechanisms. I call them lazy webinars, or actually sometimes they're called webcasts, so they don't try to be something they're not. But I'm all about actually getting going. This is intended to give an insight into big picture, which ironically is via tech, when actually we do most of our work in the room with people in groups, whether it's one-to-one or small groups, big groups and teams. What we're going to gain an insight in today is how we use big picture with teams, specifically when someone's joining the team, which could either be where somebody is being recruited. And I think I was reading your background, Jay, about recruitment for Broughton, and I saw Broughton, yes. So I was reading into that, so I was interested in that. So any insights we can share either during or after would be good about the way you do your work and how you spot talent, bring them on. I think with regard to the time we'll spend, it's a brief time, so we'll do a start, a middle and an end. The start will be the work we might suggest to do using big picture before someone joins, so we can do the preparatory work and give you an insight into how we do that. We'll do the middle part about what actually happens when that new person joins, and I've got another little practical exercise to do there. And then at the end part, we'll kind of bring it together, and I'll give you a little bit of an insight into how we converge, if you like. I love the converging word, and also the emergent behavior word. So how you manage to intercept one new member of staff or a number into an already established team. And I think going forward, we have a challenge around that generally because of how often people move jobs and the gig economy and whatever. We expect new talent to come in and be effective almost immediately. There's a reason we recruit people, but then maybe we overreach a little bit and fail to deliver in terms of how quickly and how effective that new person can come into the organization. And I think we all have a responsibility for that. And I think sometimes in terms of overreaching, we set high promises and value and invest a lot of time and money in getting the right people identified and through the recruitment process. And I think the really hard thing is to provide them with an environment in which to land and to start being effective And I actually think that's the really hard bit, because you've got a lot of people involved in that process. And I think sometimes my experience is we miss the opportunity to harvest the energy that that new person can bring into the organization and the kind of experience that they can share because of what they've done previously. And that can be any level of the organization. One thing that Big Picture does is it's a great leveler. It's, you know, we're all human beings. We all naturally, at most of the time, want to do a good job. And you can bring massive value to an organization from any point of perspective. And that's one of Big Picture's key messages. And by giving people the opportunity, the environment, and the language to do that is what we're all about. The whole reason Big Picture exists is because I can't, or I couldn't achieve the level of engagement in an organization that I wanted to in the time that I had, and time is always limited on a project. So what I used to do, if you haven't watched the Big Picture video, pitch video, is I would do lots of doodles in my book. I would use them for myself, and all I've basically done, this stuff behind me here, is all really what used to be the doodles in my book, and all I've done is lifted it out of the book. I'm a great doodle. I've always got an ink gel pen in my hand and a nice book. What I've done is basically lifted it out of the book, put it into a kind of symbol formation in a template, and then I encourage the people I'm with and my practitioners and whoever's using Big Picture to give them the prompts to start expressing themselves using the tool. And that's basically, in essence, what Big Picture achieves. The fact I sell kits, workshops and programs is more the kind of business model that sits around it. What's at the center is, if you think of it a bit of a language, what we'll impart to you today is a little insight into that language. And by giving you that language, and I think it's accessible to everybody, irrespective of background or seniority, I think that's something that's really powerful, because once you give people the language and the environment, you start to find out, we call it sharing useful truths. So that means people sharing with others what they really think, instead of moaning about it around the coffee machine on the lift. So that's a bit of an introduction for me. Are there any reflections from your own background as to whether some of that is new, some of that it's packaged up of old stuff, or actually it's pretty much what you think anyway? Any thoughts, anybody?
What would you like to do?
Lewis, Jay? I mean, Jay, you're from a recruitment type of field, so just to maybe compare it to with your experience and insight. Any things that trigger any thoughts there?
Yeah, so as far as taking on board previous experience, it's something we try and do. Because of the nature of the business we're in, there's a lot of regulation, so we need to make sure we're compliant with that. But we don't take a view that you come in as a blank sheet of paper ready to be filled with our stuff. So we do take on the experience and try and maximise that across a number of areas. But yeah, we've got quite a long onboarding process, really. There's quite a lot of material covered in it.
That's an interesting point on the material, because I think that can be what happens naturally. If I remember one of my clients saying to me, it's a bit like shoveling as much information into the new starter's head in the shortest amount of time. And I always remember drawing that as a doodle and thinking how almost macabre that picture looked. It was about physically taking a pile of stuff and shoveling it into a head as a person, and almost that was the whole idea of those 2 days. So it was very much a one-way broadcast mechanism. Now, ironically, he did use a Big Picture, and that was what was required at that time, but it then moved on to a more two-way dialogue as time moved on. So we'll just jump in. So what I like to do, if you have got the prop, and I know, Lewis, you haven't, you'll see on what the prop you've got down the left-hand side, you've got some symbols. And I'd just like to, if you haven't already, just tear them off or cut. If you've got some scissors handy, I'd just like you to cut down the lines and just rip off the T, measure, and the challenge and opportunity symbol. So if you just do that for me, it's a bit of tearing and sharing. And what I'd like you to do, I said earlier about the kind of conversation that should and could happen before that new member joins. So this is all about achieving clarity with the purpose of the team and the business before that new joiner joins. So we're going to focus down on a very specific element. So you might be 2 or 3 weeks away from a new starter joining, and somebody in the business might be scratching their heads thinking, how are we going to create this clarity for this, you mentioned, Jay, blank sheet of paper? In regard to knowledge of the business, they might have limited knowledge. So how are we going to transfer that knowledge? And this is all about getting the team on board, the current team, about what they think about the business. So one little exercise we do, I'd just like you to draw, maybe turn your prop over and at the centre of the page, draw like a smiley face, or you could just write what good looks like, or a sunshine. I'd just like you to draw that then to the page, the blank page with sunshine at the centre. Then what I'd like you to do is to just consider this. I'd like you to take your team and your measure symbol, and I'd like you to place them as close or far away from that sunshine as you think they are important to the business. So if you think the team are more important to the business, put the team measure right at the centre. If you think measures are more important, then put measure closer to the centre. Although you put a couple of the image, the symbols, I'd like you to think about some other things which you could just write in with your pen. If you just write in technology, where do you think technology is with regard to the importance of the business? Where do you think processes are? And where do you think the customer and money are? So I've given you a list there. You have symbols for team and measure. And I'm also throwing at you technology, processes, customer and money. And the way you land that on the page, if you just have a reflection of where you're landing it, the closer to the center means you're indicating that's more important to the successful business for you. And I'm going to show you mine. I'm just going to share what I've got. Just let me share here. I'm just going to hold it up like this. So there we are, that's mine. So what I've got, it's got my smiley face, and I've put customer at the center, and I've got my process close to that, which I probably don't agree with, but I put it there anyway. I've put the team measure, the team symbol there, and the technology measures, that's the blue one. So this is customer, sorry, this is team, this is process, this is measure, customer, and money down here. So what I'm indicating there is I'm giving a sense of what I think is important to the business. And what I'd like to do, maybe, Joanne, if you've been following along, is maybe just compare a little bit and contrast with what you had compared to what I had.
Yeah, so on mine, I very much put customer and team very central to my smiley face. Without the team, we couldn't do what we do. We're a scale-up company. Everything's so chaotic at the moment, but without the actual drive, passion, and motivation of the team, we just wouldn't be where we are now. And everything we do is centred around customer as well. So for us, it's definitely customer and team who come first. Then I've got kind of process and technology a bit further away.
Yeah.
And then I've got money and measure a bit further away from that. Obviously, everything's very important, but definitely for us, it's all about our people and our customers.
Excellent. That's beautiful. And what happens is you have, if you can imagine, and we're not going to hang around, but we'll all have different views of that. And what happens if you do that in a room with physical props, like with these poker chips, and we've got some frisbees lying around, but they're over there, so I'm not going to go and get them. We kind of, when I talk about kits and resources, we talk about physical props and resources. So what we've just done there is we've used a very basic insight form of big picture. But if you extrapolate that and extend it to using physical props, which people will interact with and get hold of, then you and I, Joanne, would naturally probably stand together, and we would have a conversation about you putting people where you did. My rather controversial placing of process here, because I don't actually believe it, but I did it because I just thought you might say to me, why do you think processes are so important to the business? And what happens is I would respond and answer to that, and probably we would come to some agreement it isn't, and therefore I would push the process symbol out, and then we come to some agreement. The point of that whole thing is we're having a conversation which is sharing useful truths about the business without even probably realizing it, because all we've done is walked into a room and started interacting with what is an inanimate third-party prop. It just happens to be designed to trigger the kind of conversations where we share useful truths. And there's something really, I love that part of the process. And actually, we're not even using the template at this point. The whole point of this exercise before the new joiner comes in is because what we're doing is we are passing over the knowledge of the language to the team. So by using a funny exercise, which actually isn't even important in respect of what's right or wrong, although there are some themes, it's beginning the knowledge sharing of what each of the symbols mean, i.e. to place them on the page, you have to know what each of the symbols are. So I don't know if you've got kind of any reflection on the choice of symbols. You know, the choice of the symbols, a team and a customer symbol is all about people. We always start with that. Technology, process, measure, and money are other things that we find interesting about the business. And if you're thinking this through, thinking about a business that you're familiar with, start to think about the connections you might make between those symbols and your business. So earlier, Jay mentioned about compliance, which I'd not thought of. But compliance might mean I see more measure and process symbols, because for me, compliance probably means process, probably means some measuring a process, because if you don't have processes and you're not measuring them, how can you be compliant? That's one way of doing it. There may be other ways, but we might find that theme brings out some of them. Other companies who are technology driven, either from a selling perspective or an internal perspective, we would see the technology symbol. Money is an interesting one. If we look at the purpose and vision of a company, how much does the purpose and vision relate to the money making idea, or is it more of a softer core value type purpose and mission? So what we're doing is we're just scratching the surface here. We're using symbols to create fantastic conversations between employees. And by doing that, they are gaining knowledge of a language which is going to help them achieve clarity with what the business is all about. So that's the kind of first step. So thanks for playing along. Lewis, I'm not going to come to you. I can come to you because you're now talking. But what I'll do is I'll come to you at the next juncture, and you're a copywriter and a compare, so I'm really hoping you've got some fantastic words to share with us in a moment. No pressure. So what I'm going to move on to now, if you go back to the prop, we're moving into the kind of the chunky bit now. So we've got the prop in front of you, hopefully. You haven't, Joanne, but basically back onto the front of the page. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the scene now that actually the new joiner has arrived in the business. They've come through the door, the door's burst open, and they're there. And what you're going to do is basically set up a series of meetings, and maybe a bit of it like a treasure hunt device, where they go off and they talk to people, and you're going to give them a template or a canvas in which to record that information. So it's the same kind of information that would be in Jay's stack of material, and some companies have lots to read, but this is a different kind of dynamic where this new starter comes in, and I'm going to give you the information, and I'd like you to try and record it on the prop, and that might be a bit difficult for you because you're not familiar with it, but I'm going to give you a start. On the top of the page, I'm going to say to you, as a company, which is called Service Co, by the way, just a made-up name, our purpose, and there's a green part at the top of the page to record this, is to provide a reliable customer service 365 days, 24/7. So, Mr. New Starter or Miss New Starter, Mrs. New Starter, I'm telling you that's what our purpose and vision, and we're going to give you a place to record that information. And at the top of the page, you can write that in there. And actually, just to the right, we're going to give you a core value, which is all about trust. This company is all about trust, and we're going to build that up. We don't want you to forget that. We want you to weave that through everything that you do. So I just want you to try recording that in your own way. Nothing's right or wrong. Just use the templates and record that. And now we're going to, if you're with me, and anyone at any point can put their hand up and say, stop, I'm stuck. And you can just then sit back and enjoy the entertainment of me getting really warm in my shed. We'll move on. This guy or lady moves off into the business, and I say to him or her, you're off, and I've set you up a meeting with the ops manager, and he's called John. So John is the operations manager. So look on the page, there's a box for operations. So somewhere in that box, take the team symbol and you put it onto the operations box, and underneath you might write John, ops manager.
Yep.
Basically what you're doing is a bit mind mapping. Nothing clever's really happening. All you're doing is helping the individual make a note of the information they've got. What's clever about it is by using the symbols in the way that we are, they're going to be able to integrate their understanding with the team, because the team did it a week or two ago, and that's where we're going to end this. But we're going to build this picture up. I'm also going to let you know that that yellow customer journey that you can see behind me on the board, that runs from left to right. If I go that way, it goes left to right, and it's got that little circle in the middle. Now, that's probably jumped out at you. Well, what's that? We've seen that symbol before. That's the customer. It's written on the left-hand side. You saw it on when I showed you mine. So basically, I'm going to say to you, and this is where you can be quite creative. John's got an issue when he talks to me. He tells me his biggest challenge. I'm quite punchy when I start a new job, this guy. And he says to him, what's your biggest challenge, John? John says, my biggest challenge is we're trying to provide a reliable customer service, but actually, and I'm trying to minimize the downtime of the service, but actually that's a massive challenge, and we're not meeting the expectations that are set to the customer. So what I want you to do is to use your measure symbol and your challenge symbol to just note somewhere, what has John said there? John said we've got the minimum downtime issue. And I've also said there's an opportunity, because John's told me, that we should be setting clearer expectations with the customer before they take on the service. And what I would expect, even though we've been in here for a really short space of time, I would expect that the new starter is able to make those notes quite clearly on the template. And I don't know how easy you might find that out of 10. If you want to give me a score out of 10, how easy that is, or you're really stuck, then just give me an indication. Lewis, how are you getting on?
Okay, I guess. Are we coming with our own examples? Or?
Yeah, with your own examples. Have you been able to follow along and get the information down on the page?
Yeah. No, I've just been like yourself, doodling on my own book.
Yeah. So let me show you mine. Mine's here. So basically, I wanted to share the screen, but I'm just having a few technical difficulties. So what I've got here is I've got John, the ops manager here. Okay, minimize downtime. I don't know if you want to compare it to yours. And I've got the fact that he's presented that as a challenge, and I've put it really close to the customer journey, because I think downtime suggests customer journey is hit. And what John suggested as an opportunity is that we're a bit clearer with our expectation setting with the customer up at the top. And if you look at this part of the page here, we really we really need to take an opportunity to give clearer messaging to the customer up front, because we either fix the downtime issue, and or we give the customer clearer expectations up front. And that's really important. So that will have come from an example of talking to the customer. Talking to John and getting an expectation. Now, of course, that new joiner might sit in a number of meetings in their first week or two. They might go off and talk to other individuals in the business, and what they'll do, not on an A4 sheet, because a lot of our resources are bigger than A4. They're A2, they're boards. They're big props. So basically, there's a spatial piece to it. The A4 is because it's practical to print off. So what we do is we use big picture resources to build up these representations of the business and what's happening. Thoughts are coming to the fore and you're able to make connections. I don't know whether any of you found like grouping symbols together, or you can see from mine I overlapped them a little bit. I don't know whether there's any of that going on in yours. Naturally, our brains want to self-organize and create patterns. If we move into the final part, if you like, well, how do we bring that together? Well, I think we can imagine how this works. So the team have established some clarity by having some workshop themselves before the new joiner starts. They use all the same symbols and maybe one of the big boards at the front. We run that little icebreaker session. The new starter joins and they're given a bit of a mission to make sense of all the information that they're given and the conversations that they have. They're given 2 or 3 weeks to build their own picture. And then at some point, you bring everything together. And basically that means having individual views of what's going on in the business. And then you bring it together in a kind of group view at the center. And actually the individual views fall away and the clarity exists on the page. And you might simplify and you might weed out and you might tidy. But you end up with, for that new starter, it has expanded.
Excuse me.
The team are talking, and not only are they talking, they're talking using a language and a form of understanding the business that brings so many more benefits than just getting the new starter in. You have clarity on your business model, you have connections between the elements of the business and the purpose and the vision. You have a sense where the new starter will be able to offer value. They themselves have a sense how they fit in and what they can do for the team. And you have an agreement of what good looks like because you have the measures defined. So I think you have the measures for compliance, but you also have the measures of what could make this business more competitive, more profitable, more innovative and more creative. Measures, all these words are chosen, so they're quite versatile and can be changed in the way that the session is facilitated. So we're reaching a bit of an end now, and I do like to finish almost on time. I think we started at 4 past. I've just got 4 minutes to wrap up. What I'd like to finish is just be clear, that kind of process, expanding the team, that has been the kind of theme today. What Big Picture offers is an adaptive framework which takes some of these symbols and, well, the symbols and the layout on the page, it wraps it up in a series of resources. We call them kits. And if we were to go on the yourbigpic.com website, if you do that in the background, under the kits heading, you can go and see all the different kits. We've got kits for meeting, we've got kits for workshops, we've got a living kit which is made of rope, and you can actually walk into it as a you can have a whole room. It's 5 to 7 meters big. You can actually walk in and out of it with massive props. We have the boards at the front, which are the workshop kit, and the meeting kit is something you might have on the table as an A2 sheet. The workshops that we run are facilitated by one of the Big Picture practitioners, but we always aim to hand over that skill and that experience into the organization. So we can sell workshops or we can help you run them. And the programs are basically a series of activities with a defined end goal. So a program could be any sequence of activities that could be over a number of days, weeks, or months. And that's what Big Picture is all about. I hope I've given you an insight. I'd love any kind of reflections or thoughts back before kind of my pressure valve goes off because of the heat. I think it's about 28 degrees in here at the moment. So any thoughts and reflections just in tying up? I'll go in reverse if you like. So back to Lewis. Any thoughts of feelings and connections you've made whilst you've been involved?
No, it's just it was just really interesting. I like that it was a very simple framework that you can get everyone to, using the same language basically. I think that was it. Yeah, it's good. It's just really simple, but like a really good way of doing it. Yeah,
I think I love that feedback, Lewis, because actually I've put a lot of effort into making it simple, and I sometimes use the word "it appears simple," and then I always underlay it or overlay it, whichever way. With if you imagine you've got 8 symbols and maybe 5 big areas of the template, Imagine the
Yeah.
number of permutations. So what you're doing is, if you study kind of emergent behavior or something like that, you're using simple pixels or points. It's when you join them together into the picture, the number of permutations, it almost becomes, it's one of those compounding mathematical equations where you basically can result in any number of any number of permutations. So I love that kind of simple. It's intended to be accessible by all and an adaptive framework. So thanks for that feedback. Joanne, over to you. Any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I mean, the company that I'm in at the moment, I've not been in it very long, and we don't have really a robust kind of induction program. So it's good to kind of get different viewpoints as to what could work to keep everyone aligned, engaged, and to make sure that any new starters coming into the business understand everything and are aligned with our culture and our values. So yeah, it's interesting. Thank you. Appreciate you going through it.
No, that's fine. And over to you, Joe. Your reflections to end with.
I like the onboarding process, but I could see a role for it down the line.
Excellent.
With existing team members.
Excellent. So at the moment, your process is more provide the information and then they will skim read it or work through it in their own time, kind of thing. Is that more the process?
Partly and partly led training as well, because we're a laboratory, so you have to have lots of things demonstrated and proof of competence and things before you can go and do stuff.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, we'll break there then. We've finished bang on 30 past because I got told off last one for going over too long. I reward myself a gold star for at least being timely, and then any other feedback's a bonus. So I'll take one off. So have a lovely weekend. So appreciative for joining and giving up your half an hour on a Friday afternoon. Please share with friends and tell colleagues, and we'll have in 2 weeks. I'm going to run these regularly with a different team. So thanks very much. Have a great weekend. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.